aimed both funds are aimed at community-led organisations and community-led projects, which is why we wanted to do a joint presentation, because we're trying to reach a lot of the same people just to talk through the funds. So Untold Stories is open now and has a deadline of 12th of January. And then the community grants should be opening in December 2021, not 2022. Next slide. So just to talk really quickly about the Mayor's Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm. It's part of his commitment to cementing London as a diverse global city. It was announced in June last year, but actually a lot of the work had started already with projects like Millicent Fawcett statue in Parliament Square being unveiled in 2018, which was the first statue of a woman by a woman in Parliament Square. But this work was brought into a much more sharp focus with the Black Lives Matter uprisings, particularly the toppling of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol. And so the Mayor responded by setting up a commission to sort of make recommendations around sort of how we handle contested heritage and how we make London streets much more representatives of the people that live in and work in the city. So 14 commission members were recruited. We also have a partners board and a borough working group who support this work as well. Next slide. So Untold Stories supports community-led projects that either create new objects, which can be murals, artworks, plaques, benches, gardens, play areas, that increase diversity and representation in London's public spaces, or it will support projects that provide context, insight, or draw attention to invisible, contested, or missing heritage in London's public spaces. So that could be things like walking tours, augmented reality projects, anything that kind of highlights what is in the city or what is missing in the city. Round one is open now and has a deadline for funding of the 12th of January. Round two will be opening in spring 2022. So it's £1 million fund and we'll be distributing that in those 2 rounds. Next slide. So just about eligibility and who can apply. Organisations must be a constituted community group or not-for-profit organisation, and they must be based anywhere in Greater London. They must also have a turnover of less than £500,000. That's because we kind of want to keep some of the bigger organisations, we want to exclude some of the bigger organisations because we want to reach those groups that are led by people who have perhaps been excluded from funding previously. Unconstituted community groups can apply, but you have to work with a sponsor organisation. A sponsor organisation is someone who can write a reference letter for you, submit their governance documents, and accept the funds on your behalf, but ring fence them in an account. Priority will go to organisations or groups that are majority led by Black, Asian and minority Londoners, deaf and disabled Londoners, LGBTQ+ Londoners, women or people from a lower socio-economic class. Just bear with me a second, I have to let the dog out. So sorry about that. Next slide, please. So there are 2 levels of funding available for Untold Stories. The first are smaller grants, which we've called Test and Nurture, and they are grants of £1,000 to £5,000. And they're really for people to test new ideas, develop an idea into a project. So it might be that you've been thinking about something, but actually you need a bit of funding just to do the initial work to turn it into a full project. So that could be things like community consultations or workshops. You might want to work with an artist, local historical society or heritage group to talk to your community about some of the ideas. No partnership funding is required for this fund. You just need an idea with some goodwill behind it, and really a sense of what the next steps are to get you to where you're going. Next slide. And then we have the Grow and Make Happen grants, which are grants of up to £25,000. And these are really for projects that have been developed. You know what steps you need to do, you know what it is you want to do. And so you might have tested an idea. It might be something that's completely new, or it could be a project that's working well, but you need some funding to continue or grow it. So that could include making and installing new objects, developing and delivering tours or trails that highlight missing or hidden diverse heritage, or new digital or augmented reality projects. The Grow and Make Happen grants, the application is a little bit more complex. We need to know that you've considered things like permissions, licensing, maintenance if it's installing a new artwork. Also, you are not required to have any partnership funding for Grow and Make Happen grants, but it is encouraged, particularly depending on what you want to do. As a lot of projects in the public realm, £25,000 isn't a huge amount of money to make that happen. Okay, next slide. So that was a bit of a whistle stop through Untold Stories. And then I think Amanda, if she's still there, yes, she's there, is going to talk a little bit about community grants.
Great. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Sorry if I was on the camera at the same time as Anne. But yeah, anyway, I just realised a little bit way through. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me as well. I mentioned to Steve at the beginning, due to, I won't bore you with the details, but internal governance delays, I'd hoped that these grants would be live sort of by this week, but unfortunately they're not. But we're hoping, I think they will be live on the week beginning of the 13th, or well, on the 13th of December. So I didn't want to cancel today because we're kind of got everything in place for today, and just really just to give you a bit of a heads up in case this is something that would be of interest to you. So yeah, the aim of these grants, they're community-led projects like Anne's, that focusing on groups that have been disproportionately so negatively impacted by the pandemic. We purposely haven't been prescriptive about who those groups are, because there are so many groups that could, you know, be relevant to. And so whenever I've been scoping this project, whoever I speak with, it seems like, you know, they're a priority. So the list would become endless. So I think within the application, that's up to applicants just to clearly tell us why that group is so impacted. So that's fine. Before I go into this as well, just to say that because we're not live yet, none of this is really definitely set in stone. So yeah, this is probably what it will be like, but not 100%. But yeah, initially projects to support outcomes of one of 9 mayoral missions, which is the Building Strong Communities missions, and I've listed them here. I'll just quickly read them out. So Londoners are supported, so the projects will be to support either 1 or 3 depending on the type of grant that you go for. So Londoners are supported to shape their communities after the pandemic, for example, meeting new needs that have emerged by developing communities, activities and services. Unheard voices are amplified and heard so that communities have influence and control over their decisions. For example, people from communities that are unrepresented in decision making have opportunities to actually have their voices heard and start shaping change. Feelings of belonging are increased, loneliness and socialisation are decreased, and feelings of connection within and across communities are increased. So relationships are strengthened between neighbours and communities, for example. Next slide, please. Okay, so For funding, we've got £900,000 worth of grants across 3 rounds. So as I say, next month. And then probably I would imagine one in March, end of March, and one in June. We've got 2 types of grants, so micro grants and small grants available in 3 different tiers. So as I've put there, for tier 1 would be a funding of £1,000. Projects can be delivered at any point, at any time, for up to 1 year. So, yeah, that's completely up to you from the project start date. So, that could just be a one-off event, probably quite a few, I'd imagine, for that amount of money. And then tier 2 is also a micro grant, and that's up to £5,000. So again, up to 1 year from the project start. And then tier 3 is small grants, so funding of up to 10,000, and those projects can be delivered at any point, any time, for up to 2 years from the project start, but doesn't need to be 2 years, just to make that clear. Next slide, please. I guess, yeah, okay. These are available to small equity or community-led organisations. And we are going to include definitions in the prospectus, but equity-led, I've said that at least 75% of organisations' trustees and at least 50% of staff members have past experience of the issues that those projects are tackling. And the other one was community-led, whereas our definition is of at least 51% of organisations' leaders, so that's trustees or senior managers, are people with lived experience, again, of the community they are supporting on this project. So we've purposely, as I say, nothing set in stone, but purposely looking at this being available to organisations with annual turnover of 50k and under. That's for the micro grants, and then for 200k and under for the small grants. Again, similar to Anne's grants, we really want, I guess, organisations to realise or to be in a better position to be able to apply for these grants, and some of the less organisations who have had funding previously to be excluded. We expect to fund about 160 projects over the 2 years. And just to give you a bit of a breakdown, we've got 350,000 for rounds 1 and 2, and then 200,000 for round 3. We are looking, you can see there, to fund a mixture of micro and small grants for the first 2 rounds. And then for round 3, that will be micro grants only. So 50 of the £1,000 grants and 30 of the 5,000 grants, and that's purely so that we can have, so that the small grants have up to 2 years to deliver theirs, and round 3 we need to be finished by a certain amount of time. What else can I say? I suppose that in terms of guidance around the types of projects, we kind of we want to be prescriptive as well, and we're expecting hopefully to receive kind of a broad range of types of projects. So it could be storytelling and cultural, community cooking and growing, festivals and celebrations, working with children and young people, intergenerational, mental health projects to support a particular community need. But within the prospectus, I am going to give some sort of just examples, I suppose, just to give you an idea. And so a couple of them I've put in there would be like, for example, a 10-week project in Lewisham to increase accessibility to key public services for London's blind, partially sighted and visually impaired people who may have been feeling disconnected or unaware of what's unavailable in the area they live. Or weekly mental health groups for young people who are experiencing anxiety about their future due to unfavourable labour market conditions due to the pandemic. Or regular weekly sports or other activities for LGBTQ plus individuals who may have experienced social isolation during the pandemic. So that's just a little flavour of the types of projects that we would be looking to fund, but really open to suggestions, which is one of the exciting things So I think that's probably all from me. As I say, once these do go live, I'm trying to think the best thing to do, because there's so few people on the call today. It's probably easier that I just get your details, and yeah, I can let you know when they're available. Thank you.
Okay, so just to talk a little bit about the application process. Amanda and I have been working really closely together on these funds to kind of make sure that we are giving applicants kind of the best opportunity to tell their story, and to tell their story in their own words through the application process. So we just wanted to talk quickly through a little bit about the kind of information that we're looking for these grants. So I always say that applying for grants is a little bit like storytelling, and you have to start from the very beginning, because we don't know as funders who you are or where this project has come from and how it sits with your wider work. So really it's about going back to kind of the basics and leading us a little bit by the hand to tell us what your project is going to do and a little bit about who you are. And I think, you know, I used to do fundraising, and I know how incredibly soul destroying it is to sit in front of a funding application and sort of fathom out what people are trying to ask of you. But I think the most important thing to remember is that you're talking to other human beings. And it's other human beings who are really excited and passionate about this work, who really want to distribute funds to support Londoners. And so we want to hear your voice. We don't want a load of technical language or stuff that, you know, you don't feel you would normally say. Use your own voice so we can really hear that. So first of all, we want to know who you are and who you represent. So who makes the decisions in your organisation, and who are the people that benefit from the work of your organisation? Also, who are you working with kind of more widely on this project, and who have you spoken to? And I think also, you know, for the community grants, we really want to hear about what is the experience of those people during COVID and coming out of COVID, which will then lead you to what you want to do and why. So if you talk about that experience of in COVID and what people's needs are now in a post-COVID world, not that we're quite in a post-COVID world yet. And for the commission, for Untold Stories, it's really about, well, actually young people locally don't feel represented in the streets of London. So we want to do something that represents our community. And so this is kind of the big vision of where you want to get to once your project has finished, the what you want to do and why. And then we want you to tell us what activities you're planning, what work are you going to do to help you get to that big vision, and how are these the best activities that will get you there. So for instance, for Untold Stories, it could be, well, we're going to do some community consultation because we want to know how people really feel when they're in London's public spaces. And we know that there's a local wall that we could do something on. The council are going to give us permission, but we want to talk to people about what that should be. For Untold Stories, we want to know who or what will be represented with in either your final object, or if it's a project that provides context on what you're doing. And then really key, I think, for both grant programs is how are you involving your community in making decisions. Amanda talked earlier about the Building Strong Communities mission, which is really about giving voice and helping people to be part of their community by making decisions about their area. And that's the same for Untold Stories as well. This is about increasing representation, so you can really see the contributions that so many different Londoners from different backgrounds have made to making London such a great city. And then finally, for Untold Stories, we really want to know, how will other people feel about your project? We've seen in the news how controversial things in public spaces can be, and people will feel differently about them. So how can you tell us how you've talked to more people locally to understand how they might feel about your project? Then we want to hear about any future plans. So where does this project to get you to? Do you have plans to make this creating new murals for your public spaces a new thing? Are your future plans to keep fundraising and sustaining this activity? And also for sort of the Untold Stories grants, if you are installing something new in a public space, how is that going to be maintained and who is responsible for that? And then finally, we want to know about the skills and experience of either your group or the people who are helping you to make this project happen. It might be that this is a totally new project for your group, but actually you're bringing in skills from your professional life into this. So please tell us about that. What we really want to see is that you've involved people who are experts in what they do, and who have the relevant skills and experience to make it a success. Amanda, is there anything you wanted to add there?
Thanks, Anne. I don't think so. I think we've probably covered all of it. Yeah, I think I'm good.
Great. Next slide then. So just a bit of support that's available through Untold Stories and community grants. For Untold Stories, one of the things we found when we did some initial community engagement and consultation was that lots of people want to do a project in the public realm, but they don't really know how to go about doing it. They don't know what they need to consider or who they need to contact. So we have some training available to help people understand that. So tomorrow and Wednesday this week, we have a workshop on what to consider when designing a project for the public realm. Next week, we have a workshop that is around monitoring, evaluating, and funding public realm projects. We know there's going to be a huge demand for our funds, so we want people to be able to think about where they can get the most amount of funding from and have the best chance. And then finally, we are working with the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who are doing a workshop around what hidden heritage resources there are in London that you can use for a public realm project as inspiration and for information. Also for Untold Stories, we know that a written application form can sometimes be a barrier if people have specific access needs. So we have a small access fund that you can ask for support to help you understand the grants and apply. So that could be things like a note taker or a BSL interpreter. And the Community Grants Fund is working with a number of inclusion partners to really support people to be able to complete the application and understand the grants. Amanda, is there anything you want to say about the inclusion partners?
I don't think I need to at the moment, no. Working for organisations that have got real sort of specialist reach, I guess, to a particular community needs. But yeah, we're working with them quite closely to make sure that we get real targeted reach out to the organisations we really want these grants to reach. But like Anne said, also, really supporting with those applications as well through particular needs. And we are also looking, hopefully, to have a bit of a fund available as well. But again, nothing set in stone.
Sorry, it's Christopher here from Community Links Bromley. Can you tell us a bit about who they are? Are they language? Are they sort of translators? What are their skills and expertise?
So the organisations are GLA. I don't know if you know GLA, they work very closely with organisations with Black, ethnic and minority Londoners. Then we've got Women's Resource Centre, so very much focused on women's needs. We have Inclusion London, and we also have GLA, Inclusion London, Consortium London as well. So sorry, that's LGBTQ and deaf and disabled Londoners. Yeah, see something in the chat here. Yeah.
And then also most of the key application documents and information are also available in BSL, video, and easy read formats. Next slide. So I just wanted to point out, I mean, Steve probably knows all about these people. Some of the funding sources, Arts Council England has just, is about to relaunch its National Lottery project grants, so that they will focus more on their Let's Create strategy, which is really about community-led projects and projects taking place in communities. So they'll have a bit more focus on that. The National Lottery Heritage Fund, take a look at their grants. They support local heritage projects, as well as the National Lottery Community Fund. And then I just wanted to point out My Funding Central, which if you're a really small organisation, you can register for free and search their sort of funding database. Next slide. And then this will only make much sense when we send the slides out, that these are links to all the information for Untold Stories, including the grants prospectus, access fund form and inquiry forms, if you want to tell us more about your projects. So I think that's probably it from us. If there are any questions about either of the funds.
And just to say, I've just popped the link. I think that's probably the best way if anyone's interested in finding out, when the community grants has launched, being able to get the prospectus and everything. I've just put a link where you can sign your organisation up to receive the community's newsletter, because that will be the first place that it's announced, really. So that's the best way of finding the information immediately. Any questions, anyone, for the time being?
There was something, sorry, you mentioned about the workshops for the public realm, 16th and 17th of November. How do we get those details?
I can post you a link to where they are on our website. I'll post that now. And yeah, the one tomorrow is online. The one on Wednesday is in person at the Foundry, which is just near Oval.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, they're on our webpage. If you scroll down under support with your application.
Yes. Okay.
Perhaps just to say, I really like the Untold Stories. Some of the narrative that's coming out of that. Some of the data is quite shocking, really. Doesn't surprise me in one respect, but on the other hand, just seeing the data in the form it's been presented is actually quite powerful. We are doing a piece of work in Mottingham. Catherine, who was on there, she's a one-person factory really in Mottingham, but they're doing there's a separate piece of work because it's funded through the big local, which is called Silks, and it's a craft-based design element. So the local community will be producing banners, standards, but also just in terms of the narrative within the the banners and the imagery, that's been produced from the community. And then the outcomes and the outputs will be then displayed within the community, and there'll be a permanent legacy there. So that's interesting. Unfortunately, the lead is, I think they're based in Purfleet, which is a bit of a shame, but it will be interesting. I mean, it's very much a co-produced piece of work with lots of the organisations in the area. So I think that will be, it'll be interesting to see whether there's any scope to take that work forward. I mean, it's reasonably well funded, but it's a modest investment.
Yeah, I think if there's a local group who are registered in London, then they could take the lead on the application. But then they would, reference support from the other organisation in terms of skills and expertise in that section.
Yeah, no, there's some, that will be an interesting piece of work, because it's their history really, and it's it's about capturing. So that's about a community testament, and it's about their community and how it's evolved over time, really. And as I say, it's a very poor part of the borough, really, and the borough that's been part of the borough that's been severely affected by the pandemic in terms of isolation, loneliness, and as well as some of the fatalities that have happened there as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing with the Untold Stories grants, is obviously sort of, our big vision is for a more representative public realm in London, but actually these projects do so much more than that. It's all those feelings of belonging, of creating something together with your community and making decisions about what's going on in your area as well, that has so many other positive outcomes.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I was going to ask, is there any indication on timelines when applications go in? How long before people know whether they've been successful, and when the grants get distributed?
Yeah, and it's a good question. Am I on mute? Let me just check. No. So for the community grants, if they go live sort of mid-December, they'll be open for 8 weeks, and so it probably wouldn't be going live until about 4 months later after that. Yeah, I'd say so, and the same with the other rounds.
Yeah, so I think for Untold Stories, we're looking probably at April, when people are likely to hear the outcome of their application. So start time in spring.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any other questions that anyone else would like to ask while we have Anne and Amanda here?
You're very welcome to contact us. I can put my email address in, actually.
Yeah, I'll pop mine.
And you're very welcome to contact us if you come up with any questions afterwards. And also for Untold Stories, we are working with an organisation called Rocket Science to manage the grants, and they have a phone line and an email address. So if it's any questions kind of about the application form and that process while you're actively filling it out, it's probably best to contact Rocket Science, but I am also happy to answer questions.
Okay. How difficult is it, or how easy is the monitoring and evaluation? What kind of information would you be expecting to receive on that, just very briefly? Because they are quite small grants in a way, aren't they? And I know sometimes people look at them what's required and think it's not it's not worth the effort for the amount of money involved. So
yeah, so it's one of the things that we're definitely looking at. I won't go into details. As I say, time, and as I say, it's not live, it's not sort of exactly confirmed yet, but we're looking at proportionality of grants as a really like important thing. So like, for example, if you're applying for a £1,000 grant or a £5,000 grant, it's going to be different to the expectations of the application process, but also the monitoring. So we're actually coming up with an evaluation framework in line with the rest of the Building Stronger Communities mission, and so that, you know, lots of projects across this area will be feeding into these same outcomes. So we'll be providing the outcomes to the successful organisations and asking them to you know, how and to monitor those specific things. It will only be the small grant projects that will be asking for a few more, I guess, more project specific outcomes. But yeah, we're trying to make it as simple as possible, but whilst getting the information that we need, but without asking anything more than we need, if you see what I mean, to measure, to measure true impact.
Yeah, and we're working a similar principle for Untold Stories. We're developing at the moment, so there'll be, you know, the need to capture some numbers in terms of workshops and people involved, but mainly, you know, we want to capture stories. So it's people telling us what happened, how it felt to be involved in the project, and things like that. So it shouldn't be too heavy-handed. We're also going to be working with an evaluator for the overall Commission for Diversity in the Public Realm. And so information will feed into that, but hopefully in a friendly, let's have a networking event and chat to people kind of a way, rather than fill out this huge long form.
Okay. The other question I was going to ask was around what sort of history or background would you expect? I mean, would you expect new groups to almost form, or neighbourhoods to come together which haven't formally been a group previously, who might want to put a project together and obviously have no financial background or history in that way? Would they be able to get involved, or would they need to go through another organisation who've been around a bit longer, who might sort of assist them in that?
If they're not constituted, they'll need to have a sponsor organisation who can receive the money on their behalf and ring fence it for them. If they are constituted, they'll need to just provide their governance documents and bank account details. But I think, you know, we are looking to fund organisations that, as we know, so many groups formed during the pandemic to support local people. And so we're working really hard to be able to support that work to continue with a variety of projects from both the community grants and Untold Stories.
We will provide that function for people if necessary. So we're the locally trusted organisation in Mottingham, so there's £1 million going through that, and we draw that money down periodically. There are a number of groups locally that are trying to. There's a number of funds locally that's interesting. There's an innovation fund. We will have some lottery money to distribute very shortly, and we're meeting this afternoon just to discuss some of the process issues around that. But there are certainly some organisations who've got quite interesting ideas, but on the other hand have never received funding before, so they haven't got a history of delivering projects. They've got quite experienced trustees, and they've got experienced people involved in the projects, and so they've got some longevity and understanding of processes there. But what they haven't got is a history of directly delivering projects. So we've said we'll act as a trusted local organisation on their behalf, and we've done that from some of the Friends of Parks groups and various people like that.
Perfect.
It's not without its problems sometimes.
I can imagine.
Okay. Do we have any more questions or comments that anyone else would like to make before we wrap up? We've done pretty well. We've got through it. And I say we're here to help if people want to put together any applications, test any ideas with us, we're happy to do that. And obviously you've got the contacts of Anne and Amanda. And what we will do, we'll obviously pass out the slides at the conclusion of this, and we've been recording it as well. So we'll put that up as an aid memoir. If you want to go back at the early stages and just have a quick look through, then obviously you can do that as well. But if there is nothing else, I know we're all busy. I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. So thanks everyone for coming along, and thank you especially to Anne and Amanda for coming and giving us the inside track on both of these funds. And obviously we're very keen to hear more about the Amanda's fund when it comes on stream. So hopefully you'll be back in touch with us with all of the latest information on that one.
Absolutely. Just a reminder, the link I've put in there, it's like 2 minutes. If you just pop your organisation details in there, then you'll receive information as soon as it's launched through that.
Brilliant.
Many thanks.
Okay, well, thank you everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.